Hi, everybody. Mike Napoleon here with SuperSpeed Golf. Welcome to another SuperSpeed Golf webinar. This episode, we're going to be talking all about off-season training, a topic near and dear to our hearts. I'm sitting here in Denver right now, having watched it snow all day. So off-season is definitely where we are here. Really excited to be joined by one of our SuperSpeed team members, Ryan Robillard, who just was awarded Coach of the Year for the Ontario PGA. So congratulations, Ryan. It's always great to see accolades going to our teammates here at SuperSpeed. And Ryan, why don't you give everybody just a little overview of kind of what you do, your coaching business, and how everything works for you up in Canada here in the off season?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So outside of commitments with SuperSpeed Golf, so I'm based out of Windsor, Ontario, and I run a golf instruction business. Sorry about that. And essentially the way that I focus on developing players, I do around a year-round coaching. I'm not a big fan of one-off lessons. I'm more based around year-round coaching development. And I think, like you mentioned, the weather's starting to turn for us down here as well. So we're shifting into that off-season mode, and we're utilizing this time, especially November, December, January, to really make some strides in our golf swing. And for a lot of players, this developed around increasing their club head speed. I have access to a lot of tech and a lot of toys, and essentially I will turn over any stone to help the player either A, hit the golf ball farther, or B, shoot lower scores.
Yeah, absolutely. From a coaching standpoint, I completely agree. I think there's actually a benefit for players to have, both that in-season application training and then really taking some time in the off-season, to fill any gaps in their game. And, speed for a lot of people is a big one. I mean, this is obviously the best time for any player to really start to dive hard into speed training. So a couple notes here about what we're going to do today. So Ryan and I are going to be answering a bunch of questions. First, we're going to go through a little bit of information on some of our best practices and recommendations when you're getting started with speed training. Ryan's going to be chipping in during this entire little process here. The Q&A panel that's at the bottom of your screen, if you open that up, if you have any questions as we're going, type them in there. Kyle Shea is going to be sitting in the background here answering some of those over typing, and then we're going to also pick some of those and answer those live once we get done here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up some slides. Let's make sure that everybody can see this presentation. Off-season speed training. This is something that our tour players do. This is something that amateurs do. The only difference is that our players out on tour don't always have an incredibly large amount of time to have an off season. I mean, there's not nearly as much of an off season for players out on tour as there are for a lot of amateur golfers. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things that we would do. Number one, if you're just starting out with speed training, I want to show you guys where to start. Now, Ryan, you have a lot of players that probably start over the winter and it's their first time doing speed training. What are some of the things that you think are important for them to consider before they get going?
I think most important, probably obviously number one, is just making sure that we're physically able to train, making sure that we have no ailments and any kind of lingering injuries type thing. And then after that, always making sure that we have a dynamic warm-up. We've got to make sure that our body's ready to handle that speed. And I'm sure that this might be something that we can build on a little bit later, but just making sure that we're scheduling our speed training time around the other things that we have going on, whether it be life or other golf things, to make sure that that training time is positioned in a spot that can help us maximize that training session to gain the most speed that we can.
Yeah, I think that's an important consideration. And again, the first thing you said is really important. Speed training is not a warm-up. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make right when they get involved with some of our training products. Speed training is a pretty aggressive athletic activity. You need to be warmed up. On our website, we have some great warm-up protocols. We have a great dynamic warm-up. Make sure you're going through that before you get started here. Now, where to start if you're just picking this up for the first time this winter? Training cycle 1 and our level 1 protocol. Now, we've tried to make this as simple as possible. So we recommend a 10-week initial training phase. That's going to involve 5 weeks of our level 1 training protocol, 3 days a week with a full day off in between, followed by 5 weeks of our level 2 protocol, 3 days a week with a full day off in between. Now, 10 weeks of training is a pretty intense little chunk there that you're going to get right off the bat. So when we get done with that 10 weeks of that initial training cycle, we're always going to want to move into a maintenance phase. Now, over the winter, if this is something you're going to be doing for 4 or 5 or 6 months straight, that maintenance phase can be as short as 4 weeks, where we move the training back down to once a week. However, if you're doing this and you're getting into your next one into season, you can extend that maintenance phase longer. Now, Ryan, we've seen a lot of reasons for this maintenance phase, but have you ever seen any of your players that just try to like barrel through this training, keep going, never take a break, never get into a maintenance phase? What do you think? What do you feel like happens with players that do that on that kind of pattern?
It's a question that I get a lot, and I get the question like, why can't I train more than 3 times a week? And obviously, I guess the analogy is like, if we're an athlete trying to run a marathon, or we're trying to get a better sprint time or different things like that, if we just continuously train at full capacity, we never take a break, or we never have any downtime, like risk for injury is a little bit higher. But also I feel like that downtime gives our nervous system a little bit of a chance to kind of essentially absorb all the speed that we've gained. And although we're still training once a week, we're still testing ourselves on that once a week basis. But the break is designed similar to what we see in the gym, where it's like we're tapering. We've gone through 10 very intense weeks. You've done 30 sessions in 10 weeks. For the next 4 weeks, we want you to back off to just training 1 day a week, still with that maximum intent. But there's a little bit of, I guess we call it a little bit of recovery in there. And I think also just helping players stay fresh for that when they hit level 2, they're coming off of training 1 day a week before they're ready to go full speed once again.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. A really simple way to say it is you get burned out. If you don't take any kind of a break, you just get burned out. And if you're not training at peak intensity, whether it's because it's just gotten monotonous and over and you haven't had any break, or it's that you're physically getting tired, you're not going to get the most out of those training sessions. So training cycle 1, if you're just picking this up, this works the same way for our C Club protocols as well. So training cycle 1, there's still 10 weeks, level 1 and level 2 need a maintenance phase. So that's kind of where you go if you haven't done this before. Now, what if you're a player though that has done this training in the past? Maybe you started it during the season this last year. You've gotten into and through one of those maintenance phases. Now we have a little bit more detail that we can get into, and we can get into some of our more advanced and more exciting drills. So this is our second training cycle. Now, this is going to start with level 2 for a 2-week period that we call ramp up. Now, why we think this is important is that we really just want to get you back in the habit of getting into that 3 days a week again with a protocol you're already familiar with and you've been doing for a little while, before we really take those drills to the next level and try to really max out those speeds over that next 10-week period. This is another one that we get some questions about. Why is this ramp up period in there? Trust me, the ramp up period is great. 2 weeks, 3 days a week with that previous protocol. Then we're going to hit it really hard for the next 10. That follows with another maintenance phase. And a lot of times, if you were to start at the very beginning over the winter, do the first training cycle, do a 4-week maintenance phase, and you start into this level 2, this second training cycle, you're going to be buttoned right up against season, I think, as you get done with this into that next maintenance phase. And this is where we'd probably have that maintenance phase probably extend for a longer period of time during that season. Do you see that kind of pattern with some of your more competitive players, Ryan?
That's exactly what I see. And I think so many, especially as we start to make the turn in October, it's like, all right, yes, competitive season has ended, but we still have an opportunity for a lot of them. It's like, can we get training cycle 1 done on the back half of 2023? And if it times out well, it's like that maintenance phase ends up going through the holiday season anyways, which is a perfect opportunity. And then once we hit January, it's like, all right, we've only got a couple of indoor months left. Training cycle 2 usually fits very well with that last part of the indoor season. And then we're looking at March and April again, transitioning to more of speed season, to let's go play golf season.
Yeah, I mean, this is the best time to start doing speed training. And it's one of the reasons that we actually activate all of our Black Friday deals typically like almost through the whole month of November, is because, I mean, this is when you need to get started with this training to really get the best effect for next golf season, which is what's really the goal. All right, for those of you faithful that have been training with us for a long time, we have our third training cycle. Now, similarly to the second one, we're going to start with a ramp up phase here for 2 weeks in the level 3 protocol. Then we're going to get into our level 4 and our level 5 protocols. And for those of you that have done these protocols, we got some cool stuff in there. You have our sprint protocol in level 4. You have the Happy Gilmore swings in level 5. This is really where we're trying to really edge out every little bit of speed that we can get. And again, this is where, you know, players live that have been working with this training for years upon years. The same pattern applies though. Ramp up, then go into that 10-week primary phase, and then you're going to end with some maintenance at the end of that. Ryan, how many of your players that are, you know, really competitive athletes getting into college, you know, you find a lot of those have more fun with these advanced level protocols once they've done the others?
Yeah, I think especially when they're getting into, let's say, like year 2 and 3 of owning the product, and they've kind of, I guess we'll say, have a really good understanding of how to do something like our step change of direction drill, and they're looking for things that are activating and engaging them in a little bit different way. I totally understand why we have these drills, because there's some buildup, because some of them are a little bit on the complex side. But I believe that although they're challenging, they're very, very rewarding in the way that they get you to move and produce force and generate speed.
Absolutely. I think we've actually used some of these advanced level drills in a lot of the new protocols that we're really excited to announce today, and we'll show you everybody some of those toward the end of this presentation. But, you know, a lot of these drills are some of our favorite drills that we use with our high level players and our tour players. We just feel like there is a lot of time where you do need some build up to get the coordination patterns right to be able to max out your speed. All right, the next thing I want to kind of talk about are a lot of our auxiliary products here at SuperSpeed. You know, one of the most popular products that we've been selling now for the last year is our Tour Speed Bundle. And we created that product because it's really what, you know, all of our different tour ambassadors and a lot of those high-level players are not just using our 3-club overspeed training set or the C club, or they're not using all of these products individually. They're actually using them all together in combination. You know, in fact, some of the programs that we've built for Padraig Harrington actually use not only the 3-club set, but the C club in every session. He does like 4 sets of a lot of his drills, adding the C club in as a 4th club in those sets. So a lot of that cool stuff is there. I want to show people a little bit how to work with these different products. So the first one I want to talk about is SuperSpeed C. Now, SuperSpeed C is a counterweighted super speed club. It's all about applying speed at impact. So getting the maximum amount of speed right down around where you're hitting the ball so that we can really get the most ball speed. In fact, a lot of our research that we've done on the SuperSpeed C actually shows bigger ball speed gains in many times than when you're just working with the C club. So this is a very application-based club. Ryan, do you have any players that you've seen really big success with the C club?
I do, and I'm kind of laughing because there's something that actually Padraig said recently, which is like, if you're not using your hands to create speed, you're insane. And I see so many players, especially let's say at the amateur level and the average golfer level, that they always have this fascination with trying to jam their hands ahead so they can create forward shaft lean at impact. They don't properly understand that it's more the body that's going to get it in that position. So they always have that feeling of trying to get the hands way ahead of the golf ball. And as a result, like, it's such a limiting factor in how fast they can swing. When I have players that I see that, and I give them something like the SuperSpeed C club and say, no, like, we have to get your body in the right spot to create that forward shaft lean. Our hands and our arms are still a speed generator. Sometimes we see some massive increases in club head speed and also in distance, because for a lot of players with driver that hit a high on the face, we start to get that understanding of release. We can make a lot better contact, spin comes down, and we can get a fantastic combination of I'm swinging it faster and I'm making more appropriate contact, and we can see some massive jumps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're a player that struggles with like early release casting, I mean, overspeed training with the 3 club set is going to help because we're going to get the body moving and we're going to start to learn what it feels like to create lag and downswing loading. You want to take that to the next level. The C club is what is really where that's all about. The picture here with Nana Kors Matson, I mean, this was a major part of her program where we got her back from like 100-mile-an-hour driver swing speed up more around 110. Had a lot to do with how she was applying speed down toward the bottom of the swing at impact. C club was a major part. So let's say you've got both of those systems. Let's say you've got the 3 club training set and you've got our C club set. So how do we use these together? Well, if you're in training cycle 1, we don't want to overload the system this early on in the process. So we'd actually recommend that you do the 3 club overspeed training process twice a week. So 2 of your 3 days a week would be the 3 club. One of those days would be the C club training. So you kind of do them on different days and work on those different trainings. Now, once you're a player that's been doing this training for a long time, though, and you've gotten into training cycle 2 or 3, now it's a time when you can actually double these up. So now you can do both of those. And I would actually put them pretty much back to back on the same day so that you have some time in between. You have a day off in between those trainings still. And I'd probably take a good 5 to 10 minute break after doing like the overspeed training before you do the C club training. But we feel pretty comfortable that at that point, you're going to be capable of doing both of those trainings in the same day and not get too tired that you can't really max it out. That'll go the same for training cycle 3. And then really only other variance to this is when you only have one of the systems, which we've already talked about. Obviously, if you only have the 3 club training, you're only going to do that training, and you only have the C club, you do that training there. All of these protocols are available at the training site at our website. So check these out if you have any questions about the detail of what we're doing with those products.
Mike,
Now,
I'll just hop in for
ahead.
1 second because I've gotten this question before where they say, okay, what if I don't have the time to do both all like throughout, as example, training cycle 2, they don't have the time to do C club and 3 club in a given session. I'm normally recommending them to follow kind of that same system we would do in training cycle 1. So still the 2 and 1. But if there's players that have the time, because I know a lot of players will say, I don't have that much time to do both all 3 days a week.
Well, when you say have time to do both, I mean, we're asking you to probably take 20 minutes, 25 minutes instead of 15, but I get it. I get that point. And I think the other concern here too is if you try doing both of those, like you're in training cycle 2 and you do both those and you're really getting tired toward the end of it, that would be another time where I might back it off and go back to the 2 days a week, 1 day a week of C club. Because again, if you're not training at maximum velocity, you're not training speed. So make sure that you can handle that. And you'll know if you get to the end and you're just absolutely winded and tired and the speeds are all going down on the radar, you definitely want to back it off. Less is more with speed training. I'd rather you do less reps, less sets at higher velocity than just try to pack on the reps and do more. So what about the squeeze? We released this last year. It's been very successful. We've been using it actually with all of our tour ambassadors. We've seen huge gains in players' grip strength with the squeeze. This is a really simple one because this is actually not speed training. This is actually strength training for your hands and forearms. You can actually add this into your gym workout. You can do this whenever you want. And the 3 days a week rule doesn't really apply to this one either. We've had some players that do this 4 or 5 days a week, perfectly fine to do with the SuperSpeed Squeeze. So if you're one of those players out there that, really wants to do more, pick up a squeeze and start to really max out that grip strength. It's a big deal. Ryan, anything you've seen particularly with the squeeze in your coaching this last year?
Number one thing is grip strength, obviously an increase, but a massive correlation in reduction in injury. And especially when I'm dealing with players that are hitting an incredible amount of golf balls, and especially with a lot of the females that I work with that usually don't have the highest grip strength, especially relative to a PGA Tour player, as an example. The amount of elbow and wrist injuries that we see, I believe oftentimes are due to a deficiency in grip strength. And a lot of overuse. So it was actually funny. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a Division I coach down south, She has 6 players on her team. 5 of them go to tournaments with tape around their wrists. And she was inquiring why, or just if we had any thoughts, because they were training with SuperSpeed as well. And she was wondering if it was more training based. And we had her test the grip strength of all the players on her team, and the numbers were very low. And you combine a college player schedule or any player that's active, and there's such an opportunity there to protect ourselves if we can increase our grip strength. And for a lot of players, it's their forearm strength as well. That's the number one thing that I see. An increase in grip strength is fantastic, but as a byproduct, especially with some of the younger players that I'm working with, I'm trying to protect them, especially their wrists and their elbows, from overuse injuries.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I can tell you definitively, this has been one of the keys for the success that Cheyenne Knight's had this year, improving her grip strength. You know, Tyler Staniford and I have been teaching a lot of our SuperSpeed certified workshops this year. I mean, we spend about an hour and a half talking about all the data that we now have on grip strength, correlations to speed. I mean, there is so much out there. I think we're going to do a webinar all on all of the new things that we've learned this last year, working with a bunch of different technologies about grip strength. I can say this definitively. This is one of the biggest epidemics in the world of amateur golf, and probably one of the easiest things to fix and work on that, you know, barely anyone is doing except for those that have a squeeze now. And I think, you know, what we're starting to find is that if you have a deficiency in grip strength, it's like throwing a speed limit on your golf swing. You know, as you get faster in the speed production you're creating, you have to be able to stabilize that speed the whole way through your swing, through impact, all of it. And a lot of that has to do with your hand and forearm strength. If you don't have enough, you're going to have to use way too much of your capacity, and that's going to cause its own level of issues. So grip strength's a big thing. Stay tuned for a whole lot more information there. We're probably going to dedicate our own hour webinar to this one here in the pretty near future. How about tracking progress? I mean, I think this is pretty important. I think, you know, if you're not, you know, using one of the PRGR launch monitors or any other device to get feedback during the sessions of how fast the club's moving and kind of tracking your progress, I think you're missing out. Like, I think that's a big part. I mean, do you have your players track progress on their speed training, Ryan?
Yeah, we track everything. Because like if you're not measuring or if you're not monitoring, you're purely guessing. And if we're actually committed to actually trying to shoot lower scores and make some quantitative gain, it has to be measured. It has to be monitored. Every single player does.
And we know so much now too about, like, you know, how fast is your green club swinging correlated to your driver speed, or how fast is the red club going correlated to your driver speed. We know all kinds of cool things about, you know, if you send us an email and say, hey, you know, my green club's going 25 miles an hour faster than my driver speed, but I just can't get that red club above like 5 miles an hour faster. You know, we know that there's some potential, like maybe strength deficiencies, grip strength deficiencies. We have a whole lot of cool data on that now. And a lot of that we're going to be sharing with the world here coming very soon. All right. Another question we get all the time is, should I work on swing mechanics at the same time of working on speed? Ryan, I'll let you start on this one, and then I got some stuff to add, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, it's and I'm even looking at the Q&A. It's a question we get a ton, and I think the simple answer is no. We don't want to train both of them at the same time. We want to dedicate time to both of them individually, because if you're trying to stop coming over the top, that's a skill or that's a technical change you're trying to make. And I think we have to look at it as speed is its own separate skill that we're trying to train. And I know that people will usually follow that up with, okay, well, will speed training change my swing? Or I'm taking lessons. How do I incorporate all of this? I think we can look at it as our golf swings are ever changing. Like, no golfer is ever actually happy with the way that their golf swing is. Even the best players in the world are constantly tweaking their golf swing. So I don't want there to be a limiting belief out there that I'm not going to train speed because it might affect my swing. I think we can always work on increasing our club head speed while developing our golf swing. They just have to be done separately with the focus that we have.
Yeah, to be clear there, what we're saying is not that, you know, we can't do these two things in like simultaneous modules, but you got to separate them out into modules. So right. Like if you're doing speed training, when you're in that speed training session, focus on making the club move as fast as you possibly can. That's the only goal. Don't be thinking about mechanics of your swing during that process. Now, go take a 10-minute break. And if you have a swing mechanics program where you're trying to work on club face, path relationship, whatever it might be, then go through and do your mechanics program and have all of those same, or, have the intents there to work on those mechanical pieces. In fact, every player that we have is always going to have a speed training module program that they do. They're going to have a swing mechanics. Maybe it's a ground force program. Maybe it's a sequencing program, whatever that player needs. They're always going to have a ball flight application program where we're trying to apply speed of the golf swing to the ball. And we're also going to typically have most of our tour players also have a regular routine they're going to do that works on face control, ball flight control, hitting different trajectories, all that sort of thing. I think it's actually imperative that you do all of those things in the same overall program, just not trying to do each one of those segments at exactly the same time. So I hope that answers that question. We'll probably talk about that one more afterwards too. So some really cool stuff that we've got coming soon here at SuperSpeed. And I'm going to go through this reasonably fast so we can start getting to your questions. But I'll just say this, stay tuned, probably coming here soon after the turn of the year, like mid-January, we are going to be releasing more protocols, I think, than we currently have. Definitely more protocols than we have ever released before, and on a bunch of topics that we feel are incredibly important to supporting your speed training and optimizing your speed training. The first of those are going to be some supporting physical fitness programs that we built in partnership with a good friend of ours, Jason Glass. Now, Jason's a fellow Canadian there, Ryan. So, I know he's one of your friends, even though he's on the other side of the country. But Jason works with a lot of the best players in the world. He's one of the best strength and conditioning coaches we know. Now, do you feel like it's important for your players to have supporting physical programs along with the other things they're doing to get better at golf?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. Like anyone who's part of my programs, there's actually included sessions with a trainer, or at least an initial assessment. It's all piece of the pie. And I think, at least most importantly, it's just critical for someone to get assessed on that fitness side or that physical side to see if that player wants to increase club head speed. What is the lowest hanging fruit? Do we have a player that is strong enough to train for club head speed and they just need to focus on overspeed training? Or do we have a player that is simply not strong enough to achieve the goals that they have, and then as a result, their focus should be maybe more on that physical development to get themselves to a point where they can focus on increasing club head speed? The mistake a lot of people make is they think they know that answer for themselves, so they just make an uneducated guess. But when we have people like Jason and the TPI certified professionals around the world that can give you an honest, complete assessment, it's invaluable. It's a must-have.
Yeah, well, your SuperSpeed certified professionals are also learning some of this from us. So you can seek those players out as well. I mean, we got a lot more to come here. We're not going to tease it all today, but in general, on the physical side, we're going to have a mobility program. We're going to have strength programs for the lower body, core, upper body. We're also going to have some advanced physical protocols, one that we call our ASAP, or Advanced Speed Activation Protocol, which is really cool. That's some explosive exercises you can do right before you do speed training to get even more out of that. So tons of cool stuff to come there. Now, moving on, and again, not to spend too much time on it, we're going to kill it with ground force protocols this next year too. We've built 3 different ground reaction force protocols because it's a big piece of speed. We're going to be working on our level 1 ground force that really looks at just making sure your kinetic sequence is in order and that we're getting proper point of application. The second level looks at direction and timing of those forces. And the third piece just looks about getting more magnitude, getting these forces to be bigger. So stay tuned for all of our ground reaction force stuff. That's going to be a huge hit, I hope. And then we're going to be looking at some rotational sequencing protocols, looking at how we look at disassociation and motor control, also how we start to look at how that interacts with the torso and the lead upper arm, moving right up into lag protocols. A lot of these are protocols we've used for a long time in our own coaching, but these are ones that we're going to be able to recommend directly to players now. looking at how we just generate the idea of lag and then how we really incorporate this into full speed, massive shots there, which is going to be really fun. We're also adding another protocol for the squeeze. So squeeze level 1 you have now. Squeeze level 2 is going to be out here probably in mid-January. This is going to involve all kinds of cool stuff, but also involve hitting balls with the squeeze. Ball speed application protocols. We're going to be showing you a lot of the things that we've done with our touring professionals over the years. Actually a third level that we built specifically for Podrick Harrington, and he helped with, and we kind of worked back and forth on. So really excited about those ball speed application protocols coming soon here too. So I know that was a lot, and I know we just had, some of that, were probably some pieces that we're going to spend a whole lot of time and probably their own webinars on here as we come in the future. I just wanted to kind of show everybody, what you get with SuperSpeed is not just a set of clubs. It's also a lot of these different training protocols and a lot of things to do with them, over years and years and years of training. All right. Well, Kyle,
that was fast, Mike. Well done.
Why don't we hit some questions here?
Yeah, I'm trying to compile them. There's several of the same ones, but since you just brought that up, Mike, we've had some people ask about why our clubs are designed the way they are. Do we have any science behind what we do? Do the non-dominant swings really need to work? So maybe talk about high level, how we develop SuperSpeed, all the research we have behind it and continual research, and that it's not just a set of clubs, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, there's its own webinar for the next 2 hours, right? Ryan, we got tons. First of all, we've never released anything that we have not heavily tested to optimize its results for the player. Now, we did a lot of that research in-house in the first 5-6 years of the company. In the last 4, we've been working with Dr. Tyler Standiford out at Utah Valley University. And I mean, we have more studies, I think, than anybody in this space by a huge, huge margin. So as far as why did we design it the way we did? Well, first of all, I think the biggest comparison between our system and a lot of the others out there is that, we have 3 clubs instead of 1. And yes, although I think on the surface level that can seem a little clunkier, it's not quite as elegant than being able to, twist weights off and adjust things. We actually did a very early consumer testing study on that, where we had a prototype model that had adjustable weights, and we put players in and had them go through the level 1 training protocol with both. And it was definitive that people would rather just sit the club down, pick up the next one, and get into the training. It was easier, faster, smoother than having to worry about which weight do I put on? Did I get the right one? Do I have to unscrew this? Because when you're going through this training, it's intense, right? Like, you don't want to sit there and take a 2-minute break to unscrew the head of your thing and then put it back on. And then, I mean, it was clumsier. So that's one of the big reasons there. Now, as far as the weighting differentials in our clubs, it's really all about the MOI of these clubs compared to your driver. I mean, that's what we're really talking about, because MOI is the big piece that's going to cause you to be able to swing it faster or slower. Now, there are other aspects, though, that we have found that are important. Number one is the length of the club. So when we've tested versions of our clubs that are shorter, longer, and everything in between, and we actually do find that for whatever reason, and this is one that we do not have a pure scientific explanation for yet, because theoretically, whatever the MOI of what you're swinging is should be the same regardless of the length. We always see better results when the player is swinging an implement close to the length of their own driver. Now, this may just be a factor of cluing into the same motor program and having it feel similar to what it is when they're actually swinging their driver. Could be a lot of other reasons, but we shorten that club up by 8 or 9 inches compared to their driver with the same MOI. We don't get the same speed training results. So, I mean, that's some of the other pieces on the design there. Beyond that, it's just about keeping it simple and keeping it easy to use. Ryan, do you have anything to add there on that question?
I'll be honest, the thing that I enjoy, and actually even personally for myself when I'm in my garage in the winter training, is I like the fact that I can just simply grab the club I need and go. Grab the green club and go. Grab the blue club and go. Grab the red club and go. There's no adjusting. There's nothing required. And I think especially for those who are actively training, as you get towards the end of a session and you do start to feel a little bit tired, that at least my personal opinion, the last thing that I want to do is start to go working within a wrench or trying to adjust something. I just want to grab the next club and swing as fast as I can.
That's a good way to put it.
Thanks, guys. We have lots of questions, so we'll just try to get through everyone's like we always do here. Lots of questions on the strength and conditioning side about how to periodize that, as well as how to periodize if somebody is doing some mechanics work or range work. Mike, if you and Orion can discuss best practices there.
So, I mean, obviously Kyle's a health and fitness professional, so he knows these big words like periodization. All that means is, when should I train? Okay. How often should I train during the season and that sort of thing. So just keep it simple. You want to train when you're able to swing the fastest. So is that at noon for one person and 10 a.m. in the morning at another and 4 in the afternoon for somebody else? It is. I think you can look at this on the other side. If you're tired, or if you're not seeing, within about 2 to 3% of the fastest speeds that you're used to seeing with the green club, the blue or the red, you're probably fatigued, lower energy, and you're not getting as much out of that training session. So I think the easiest way to put it from a speed training side is just, you want to be fresh, active, energetic, so that you can keep those swings, at sort of close to the personal best, close to the peak that you're going to have. And if you have a day where you just can't get the first 6-7 swings of that training session up to par, just stop. Like, you're not helping yourself by swinging slowly during that session. Now, from the strength side, I think doing strength training on that day off in between the sessions is fine. I think you can also do strength training after you do your speed training very effectively. The only thing I would probably not recommend doing is, if you're going through a day where you have a big, heavy strength routine and you're going to, your arms are and your body feels like jello when you're done with it, that's probably not a point where you're going to be swinging at your absolute fastest right after that. So, those would be some of the pieces that I'd put together for that. Ryan, you can probably talk a little more about like when to do it throughout the season and year with competitive players, especially.
Yeah. Like, I'm reading some comments and I get this 100 times a year. I go to the gym, I do this, I do that. When should I? And I think oftentimes for a lot of players is like, I need you to test, right? I need you to try different things, because every single person is different. Because if you go to the gym 4 days a week and you play golf and you want to increase your club head speed and you have a job, like, we have so many different things going on. I just need you to experiment. There's no way that any of us can get in there and give you a specific recommendation for each individual person. And as I've answered a lot of questions for people offline, it's, do you normally train in the morning or the afternoon? And when do you normally do your strength training? And okay, if you train in the morning and do your strength training in the morning as well, can we do super speed beforehand? We can't. Okay, well then let's try super speed in the afternoon. And if we test that for 2 weeks, then we switch up our schedule and we might modify a little bit and just see over time what combination gets us the best results. Like, when I started training with super speed, honestly, it probably took me half a year of testing different days of the week and different times, because I like to have things very regimented, to find the combination that worked, especially in season, around going to the gym, training with super speed, and playing golf. You have to test it. I know everyone likes to tell us what they work on and how many days a week, and it's phenomenal that you incorporate all of that. But I think there's a little bit of testing involved, that you have control over your schedule to see what's going to work when.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I can tell you this, of the hundreds of touring professionals that use our stuff, there's some that train after they play a round of golf and it's excellent. There's some that can't do that, or they just simply can't swing fast enough. There's others that need to train within the first hour and a half that they wake up in the morning, or they can't peak out their speed. There's others that can't train until they've been awake for at least 6 hours. So it really is a lot of variance. And I do think a little bit of trial and error there. That's why I think it's so important to have, the testing equipment like a PRGR to be able to tell how fast you're going, because that's going to help you optimize this training and get the most out of what you're putting in.
Yeah, like even the biggest switch for me is I used to always work out in the afternoon. I used to always train in the afternoon. And then once I made the switch and I started experimenting in the morning, I was stunned at how much quicker. Like I'm talking on average 4, 5, 6 miles an hour faster when I train in the morning versus the afternoon. And because I ran that test, I completely switched what my workout schedule looks like.
Thanks, Ryan. Just a reminder for anyone, the recording of this will be sent out tomorrow. It'll also be posted on our YouTube channel where a lot of our longer form education lies, if you want to hop over there and check any of that out. Several questions kind of on the phases, Mike. I'll just try to kind of lump some of them together. Someone's talking about how do they actually maintain what they got in the off season through the regular season. Best way to do that. So maybe just clarifying that for him, if you want to start there.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, look, that's what that maintenance phase is all about. Okay. If you go through 10 weeks of solid training, we've found that to be a point where, I mean, 99+% of the people that went through that group have a level of permanency with the new speed that they've gained. Now, if you just cold turkey stop and don't do anything, over the next 4 to 6 months, you're probably going to lose a little bit of that. We've found that you can reduce the frequency of your training down to once a week, even twice a month, and you can gain, you can maintain 100% of what you gain during those intense periods of training. So again, that's what that maintenance phase is all about. It's a period of time to give your body a break if you're going to move right into the next training, and it's a period of time to maintain what you've already gained if you're going through a longer stretch of competitive tournaments or a season. I think it's also important to note for those of you, and I see a question right there at the top, for those of you that don't have an off season, number one, lucky you. And number two, all you have to do is look at where do you want to peak throughout the year as far as your game goes? Does it mean that if you start doing speed training that you're going to start scoring worse right away? I mean, it doesn't. In fact, most of our on-course studies and data show that it's actually going to help you get better. Now, there's going to be a slight adjustment period for the first few weeks because, last time I checked in golf, hitting the ball 10 yards over the green still sucks. So you still have to, do some of those other things at the same time, like, having a PRGR at the range and saying, wow, my 7-iron's carrying 148 yards now instead of 132. I better take that into consideration on this next shot that I hit into a green, or I'm going to be in that lake or that pond over the green. So there's a little bit of that piece that you just have to look at from a skill standpoint, but it's not going to make you worse when you start playing. If anything, you're going to see distance gains. Becoming more athletic in your golf swing, which is the primary piece that this is going to help you with, there is no downside to that. Everything is going to get better as a result of being a more athletic golfer.
Yeah, I've gotten this question a few times before from the people that Mike and I are very jealous of that can play golf 6 days a week all winter or all year long. And I think one thing you said, Mike, that was really important is for these players that are training, I'm assuming there's seasons or there's periods of time where they're trying to peak, where whether it be their club championship or their men's member guests or different things like that. And although they play golf all year round, there's going to be times where maybe that golf is not as important for them. And if they're the player that plays golf 6 or 7 days a week, you might have to take a look at like, what's the actual goal here? If the goal is to actually consciously increase our club head speed, there may be times where maybe you don't play golf 7 days a week, or at least play 18 holes 7 days a week all year long. And there becomes 2 of those days that become your speed days, where you're either on the driving range or working with your super speed clubs and trying to actually train that skill of speed. If you're playing 300 rounds a year, you can take a few of those days off and transition those into purely trying to develop the skill of speed.
Thanks, guys. I'll just try to get a couple more on these phases. Is the maintenance phase just for the season? When can you use that? And then also a lot of people like that have done it, either they had an injury from some reason, they took a vacation, like where do they jump in? How do they know where to get back in once they get back in?
Yeah, well, maintenance phases are not just for during the season. So you need to do a maintenance phase after you do a 10-week primary phase. I mean, your body needs some recovery time, and actually that'll help you get further jumps in speed as you go into those next training cycles. So 4 weeks minimum, make sure you do those. I know it's not something people don't like being told that they can actually do less training and they're going to get better results, but that's the way this type of training works. Maybe take some more time and do some of the more strength training type pieces during those maintenance phases would be another thing as well, or look at those as skill window times. for it. As far as jumping back in, it really depends. We look at, if you've gotten 6 to 8 weeks through a primary training phase and then you take a break, I think it's possible you could start at the next one. If you've only gotten like 2 or 3 or 4 weeks into it, I think you probably should start and do that training phase again. But again, a lot of that's also kind of personal and individual to you. Whenever you start one of these things, though, start at the beginning of a training cycle and move forward from there. Don't jump back in and only do 3 more weeks of the first training cycle and then think you need to be in maintenance. I would start, back and at least if you've taken at least a month off, start over and do a primary training phase, whether it's 1 or 2.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mike. A lot of questions here about if they had to choose one of the auxiliary products, what should they add, provided they've got a something to measure their speed. So should I get some force pedals? Should I get a C club? Should I get a squeeze? Talk about that.
All you, Ryan.
I think that's very dependent on what that player's deficiency is. And because if I have a player that comes to me, and obviously I'm very fortunate to have force plates that I can work with, so I know for sure if a player is deficient in generating vertical force or rotational or whatever that may be, the auxiliary product has to complement what their biggest deficiency is. And I saw this in the questions earlier. I could tell you with a lot of certainty, for the players whose step change of direction swings are not as fast as their standing swing, which is something that I see often when there's a little bit of a sequencing issue there. For that player, it is 100% the force pedals, because there's maybe a little bit of a lack of awareness on the way that they use the ground. I think for a player to self-diagnose might be a little bit tricky, but if you look at your game, where are you deficient? Where is your miss coming from? And I think that can guide a lot of players on, if I feel I need to use the ground better to generate more force, it becomes the force pedals. If I'm struggling with a technical issue, whether it be lag or release, or especially activating the hands through the impact zone or through the strike zone, then it becomes a C club. If we have a sheer strength deficiency, then it becomes something like the SuperSpeed Squeeze.
Yeah, the only thing I would add there is, number one, stay tuned, because we may be able to help you with that question a lot more in a couple months. So just stay tuned to all the channels. We'll be able to really guide you a little bit better. The other thing I would say, though, is that we've built every one of these auxiliary products around supporting the core overspeed training system and speed in your golf swing. And we've built the drill programs very specifically to not cause any negative reactions in your golf swing. So let's say that you do a great job of creating vertical force on your lead leg in the golf swing, but you don't create nearly as much lateral force or rotational torque. Well, if you go through our ground force protocols, you may not gain as much vertical force because you're already doing that really well, but you'll get a lot of benefit out of the drills for lateral force and torque. Maybe the next player does a great job with torque, but really is terrible at vertical force. Well, that person might get a lot out of the vertical force drills and not as much out of the torque drills, but we've built those programs so that anybody can pick them up and get benefits where they need benefit. So I don't think you're going to have any negative effects of any of them. I can say, just from having tested a few thousand people now on grip strength over the course of the last year and a half, everybody should have a squeeze and pretty much be working on it. Unless you're in the gym and you're, deadlifting and squatting 300-400 pounds and can hold the bar up, there's a very good likelihood that, grip strength could help your golf game.
Mike, can you talk a bit about the myth out there? I think someone asked, won't that just make me grip the club tighter? We've always heard that is something we don't want.
Oh boy, here we go.
Baby bird, Mike, the baby bird.
Trust me, I've gotten in some fun conversations at all of the PGA education events I've done this year, but the data is relatively clear, and I can show you data on many of the best players in the world now, including Padraig Harrington, who's obviously doing pretty well at the age of 52, and by the way, has 62 kilogram average grip strength. He beat me by 2 miles an hour when we were testing him. It was a very competitive thing. He wanted that win bad. What I would say there is that, so let's use him as an example. when we test his grip strength in a dynamic grip pressure sensor, so we use a sensor by Sports Sensor Technology that actually puts pressure sensors in the grip of the golf club and measures how much pressure a player uses throughout the swing. And by the way, it changes, right? It's not the same from the start to the finish. In fact, peak grip pressure in the golf swing usually happens during transition of the golf swing, when we're applying pressure to the swing to make the club change direction. Potter gets to 99% of his capacity in his lead hand and about 65% capacity in his trail hand at that point. We've seen most professional level players get above 65% of their capacity. Many of them in the 75% to 80 range is very common. And these are players that, compared to an amateur golfer, most of these players have twice as much static grip strength capacity as amateurs. So what I'm saying is the amount of force, the amount of pressure they're applying to the golf club during the swing it's exponentially more than most amateur golfers are capable of producing. So if you have a massive deficiency in grip strength and you've got a coach telling you, yeah, I want you to grip it at like a 4 out of 10, hold the baby bird kind of thing. I mean, there's a very big speed limit there of your brain is not going to let you throw the club down the range. So either you're going to apply more pressure to the grip to hold on to it, or you're going to do things like cast the club, or the club's going to slip a little bit in your hands, or when you off center hit one, it's going to like jar it at the bottom. So there's a lot of different things that happen. But best example of this I can say is like you watch players out on the PGA Tour getting a lie in 4 inches of rough, take a 6-iron and just smash one 220, and we're watching that on TV like that's not possible. Like there's no way that happens. Like the club just dies, the ball goes, like I can barely hit a sand wedge out of that. So yes, I would say we need to do another grip strength webinar. Kyle, is the big thing. I think that should just be one we put on the schedule here soon, because we have so much more data now, and the trends are very, very shocking. But
yes,
yeah, don't be afraid to be a little stronger with the club if you feel like you're having a hard time stabilizing it through the swing.
And there's several more recent videos on our YouTube page that talk about why we developed it, the science, and what you'll see from pros versus amateurs, if anyone wants to check those out.
Yeah, and like I guess one thing I'll just add there, PGA Tour players have more grip strength than 99.9% of average males. So like literally, if we were to test them all, that's what we would see. And I think that's why, especially relative to club head speed. And I think a PGA Tour player can hold it, let's say a 6 out of 10, because a tour player 6 out of 10 is an average player's like 11 out of 10. And I really wish they would have said, like, I want you to hold it like a baby bird if you have the grip strength to do so. And another one, I was actually just with Jason Zubak, 6-time world long drive champion, just a couple of weeks ago. And the thing that he said is like, it's not soft arms and soft hands. Like it's rigid hands and soft arms. You have to be holding on to that golf club. And if you're looking at a long drive professional that is trying to swing a golf club at 150 miles an hour, which for some people is like them trying to swing at 90 miles an hour, you have to be holding on to it, because if you're not gripping it appropriately, your brain's just going to slow you down.
Yeah, and the faster you want the club to move, the more force you need to be able to apply to the handle of the club to make it happen and control it. So
I think something you said that most people don't realize is like is that max grip strength, like the max amount of grip strength used is in transition. For a lot of players that cast it or early release it, the reason why they can't hold the angle is because when they're in that transition motion, they don't have the strength to maintain it, especially as those wrists are working. So then they just let it go. So that's a huge opportunity for people.
100%.
All right. We had a couple, if I don't see the distances translating to my irons, anything happening there? And then how do I best translate the speed to my driver?
I mean, speed gains are going to happen as a percentage basis throughout the bag is what we typically see. We've tracked that a lot. We're going to be tracking it a whole lot more in the future, but you generally, now again, I think this has to do some with what's your strategy when you're hitting an 8-iron, right? I think your max out speed with an 8-iron is a little different than the way you try to max out your speed with a driver. I mean, I would say that most high-level players are hitting 3, 4, maybe 5 different types of shots with an 8-iron, and not all of those are involved with like peak club head speed use at impact. But we will see that maximum speed with all of those clubs tends to go up as a kind of straight percentage throughout the bag.
I think an opportunity for players would be in that scenario that when there's no golf ball, they can swing with 100% intensity, like almost with reckless abandon. But when a golf ball get there, that mindset changes. And I don't know if we touch on this today or not, but there's also something to be said where you do your super speed training with no golf ball, we're going for max speed. There's also a portion of our practice or our warm-up when we're actually hitting golf balls. Actually, Mike talked about in ball speed application, where there also needs to be a component where we're actually hitting golf balls trying to swing at maximum speed. And I don't know if convincing our mind is the right word, but I do know for some players, as soon as there's a golf ball in the way, the mindset changes. So there's basically a bridge between what we do when we're training with super speed to when we get on the first tee. There's that training or those application programs in the middle where we're hitting golf balls with maximum intent, like direction irrelevant.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good thing to talk about with off-season training too. You know, one of the things that I like to do the most getting into the off-season with players is if we had mechanical changes that we wanted to make to the swing. Number one, I'd rather be hitting into a net to do that at the start because they can't see ball flight. And I wanted them to be more focused on how they're doing it and what it feels like to do it. And then we add ball flight back in down that process, because the higher level the player, the more focused they're going to be on where the ball's going. So you have a tour player in front of you, and you're trying to make them do something different and feel something different. If the ball's there and they can see ball flight, it's very hard to do. When the ball's not there, it's easier to do. When the ball's there and they can't see ball flight, it's easier to do. Yeah, so I think there's some transition to that. But yeah, the ball speed application protocols that we'll be launching here soon, I would say that as you get into the speed training this winter, get as much club speed as you possibly can. When this stuff all launches in early part of next year, it's going to be the perfect time for you to start applying that speed to hitting a ball, and then you're going to be ready to rock when it gets to season.
Right. I know we're kind of approaching an hour here, so see if we can just kind of knock these out really quickly. Guys, maybe one of you just answer one at a time here. This one says, change my swing all the time, does speed still work? So I guess, can you go ahead and incorporate that when you're doing all this mechanical training?
100%.
Everyone's swing is always changing. That's your fast answer.
Yeah.
Let's see. Patrick, can you guys, this Patrick one? Yeah, it's a lot here.
I was going to do the one right below it, actually. So talking about non-dominant compared to dominant side, you know, most of our players will be very close to the same. I think some of our fastest players actually get even a little faster on the non-dominant side than they will be on their dominant side. But I would say that, like, you want to try to shoot for within about 2% of the same speed. So if you're having trouble getting there, you know, there could be some other things going on. Like, you know, we're not going to go too far into coaching mechanics of the swing on the non-dominant side, but just from a raw power output standpoint, you should be able to get pretty close. You know, I might take a look at exactly the way that swing looks and see if there's something just kind of significantly off in the way the mechanics are working. That would be the only time I've seen that.
And then, Mike, someone said they've heard on a podcast that the non-dominant swings are not relevant, or I don't know, not necessary.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I would say that this isn't going to be the shortest answer ever is if you have an athlete who's in the gym 4 days a week doing ballistic training on both the dominant and non-dominant side, they have no muscle imbalances, they're working hard on both dominant side and non-dominant side exercise in a major way, and they only have 8 minutes a day to do speed training, I'd probably say that they could do dominant side training and it would be okay. However, if they had 15 minutes to do it, I'd still have them do the non-dominant training. We've seen an incredible amount of success with players only doing non-dominant training from a speed training standpoint. There's a lot of different things that happen in the brain when you do these non-dominant swings that help you break through barriers and move faster on your dominant side. And again, I would say for amateur players, there's a whole lot of physical benefits too, because there's a lot of different muscle activation, injury prevention things, a lot of stuff that non-dominant training does that you just really should not be without when you're doing a speed training program.
Kyle, I can cover Patrick's question. I had a chance to read it over. So
thank you.
So Patrick, if I gather what you're saying here, so from a strength perspective, you're stronger than some of your buddies that are swinging 115 miles an hour. So you started at 85 miles an hour, and in 16 weeks, you're up to 100 miles an hour. So in 16 weeks, you gained 15 miles an hour, which first off is absolutely incredible. And now you feel like you've been plateaued for 4 weeks at 100 miles an hour. That plateau is perfectly normal. And I guess making some assumptions here, it's clear you have a lot of strength, but there's not a lot of explosiveness to that strength. And right now, if you've only plateaued for 4 weeks, that's not abnormal. The goal is you need to keep training. When you did not get to your 1 rep max in the deadlift in a short period of time, and then it just kept going up on a linear trajectory, there's going to be stretches where we are able to gain speed. More than anything right now, your brain and body needs to get used to you moving 100 miles an hour safely, because before that, it only lets you go 85 miles an hour. So if you've gained 15 miles an hour in 16 weeks, that's fantastic. You've been plateaued for 4 weeks. Please continue to train, and you'll continue to bust through that plateau and get through that second phase of increasing speed.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that question. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities too, right? Like strength is not the only piece. In fact, power is probably the most important piece. So, if you're well-versed in the gym or you have a trainer you work with, I would definitely start looking at some more power-based exercises versus just raw strength. It's not always about how much weight you can lift. It's more about how fast you can move a lot of weight. Power is really the key to getting a lot of speed in the golf swing, and especially rotational sling power. So those would be some pieces to test. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things too, though. But I'd start to work more, try to apply that strength to other ballistic exercises in the gym and see if that helps you. It could also be some stuff in the way you're using the ground. It could be mechanics. There's a lot of different areas there that could be affecting that piece there. But sounds like you're building a good engine for everything. We just got to learn how to take advantage of it.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to lump some questions in here together. Say someone's made it through all the phases. What should they do next? Or if they're stuck on a plateau, what should they do next?
So, I mean, if you're stuck in a plateau, make sure that you're giving yourself some break on those maintenance phases. And then, I mean, hit it hard. Hit it hard. Maybe try to add in something like the C Club training. That can really be a piece that can help a lot of people kind of jump to that next series of plateaus. If you've gotten through all of the different levels, I mean, hats off. I mean, heck, we have players like Padraig, for example, who's been training with this stuff for over 10 years. You can be creative. I would say that usually the final level protocols, like the third training cycles, are kind of the ultimate expression of those drills. So the progressions have gotten to the end. So those would be the ones that I would do. I'd experiment with maybe doing less reps and more intensity. I'd experiment with like adding the C club in as a 4th club in the set is a good way to do it. A lot of different things that you can do there. And I would say definitely look at all of the different auxiliary pieces that could be limiting your speed right now, and make sure that you've looked at mechanics and you've looked at all the different strength and physical aspects, because those are pieces that can definitely help you get to the next level.
Kyle, for Rick's question here, where the question at the top where they're asking for approximate range of gains based on youth players. Unfortunately, it's impossible to give a range because there's just such a wide variance between chronological age and biological age. And he used the reference, let's say, under 10 years old. It's almost impossible to give an approximate range there, but TPI has done some fantastic studies around that first speed window. But I think when we're talking kids under the age of 10, I'm far more concerned with developing athletes that can jump and run and throw and kick and catch and developing an athlete much more than developing a golfer. I don't need a golfer to be the best 9-year-old on the planet. I need them to be an athlete.
Want him to be the fastest 9-year-old on the planet,
Yeah.
though. And I think using the Pee Wee and All-Star sets with those kids gives them a great, easy opportunity to just try to, learn how to sequence the swing, learn how to use the ground, and learn what it takes to make that club head move fast without a lot of the goals of where does the ball go. So that's one of the reasons that we use it a lot with those players.
Thanks, Mike. We've got through almost all these. I think someone's talking about ball compression after going through super speed, and then also just maintaining accuracy. Like how much should you dial back what you're doing on course versus how you train with super speed?
I love that question. I mean, if we measure like high level tour players, like even if they tell you they've got another gear, most of them are very, very close. I mean, 98, 99% of their max when they're out on the golf course playing in tournaments. So the whole dial it back to 80% stuff doesn't really hold a lot of water when you start to actually test what these players do. Now, when you get into short irons, that's a different story. Like, yeah, there's a lot of players that have like a 80, 85% swing with a 9-iron or a pitching wedge that they just love the way that swing feels, and it's a little more controlled to them and doesn't have negative effects. But when they got driver, they're standing up and ripping it. What was the other one?
About just ball compression, just I guess ball striking afterwards. Or needing to it.
I mean, the ball's going to compress more. As far as smash factor goes, all of our studies show no reduction in smash factor before and after speed training. All of Tyler's studies that he's done in his lab with TrackMan, all of that. So, if you hit the ball really solidly before you do speed training, you're going to hit the ball really solidly after. If you hit the ball all over the face before speed training, you're still going to hit it all over the face after most of the time. But there's no reduction in smash factor. I saw one in there about what to expect to gain from the squeeze. I think that's a good one. We saw our initial study was 4 weeks long with the squeeze training, saw about a 6% gain in grip strength on each hand. The next study that we're going to have is going to be out probably early part of next year. That's going to be a longer period of time, but initial signs are very good, like 10, 12, 15% gains over 3 to 4 months. Again, most people that are amateur golfers don't spend time working on grip strength, so it's low-hanging fruit because you're going to get big gains really fast working on that because you just haven't done it before.
Thanks, Mike. We had a couple of good ones from Brian here about just seeing great motivation with the non-dominant side, and just said a couple of things there. So thanks for the comment, Brian. And then one more from Andres there about vertical force, Mike. And then I'll.
Yep. Sorry, I'm reading it here. Vertical force and the downswing increased speed have been.
Everyone falls for that. And that's what I was talking about earlier. I got to get my hands forward at impact. Well, then they stop pushing, and there's a huge decrease in vertical force and a huge increase in club head speed.
Your hands
you have to get away from the
impact.
fascination of like, I have to jam my hands forward at impact.
Your hands forward at impact is a result, not a cause. Yeah. In fact, like Padraig, for example, he would tell you he's doing everything he possibly can do in the world to try to get the club head to release. Like he's trying to get the club head around as much as he can, and he can't do it because his body and the amount of lag that he's creating is moving so fast in the swing. As far as improving vertical force absolutely helps to increase club speed. In fact, lead leg vertical force, probably one of the most correlative pieces to club speed of anything that you can do. If you can get that, up in that on the lead leg over 140% of your body weight. So that's a big deal. Stay tuned for more information on exactly how to train that. We'll have that all coming soon.
The last thing I'll say on that for vertical force is a lot of players, their vertical force happens far too late in the golf swing. We see players on tour with their feet off the ground at impact. So players think that's when they need to push, where for a lot of players like that peak vertical force is happening way early in the downswing. And that jumping off the ground is a result of us applying that force when, let's say, our lead arm is parallel with the ground in the downswing.
Yeah.
That's what the force pedals and the super speed protocols work on. All right, we got through all the questions. Once again, the recording will be available tomorrow, and it'll be on our YouTube site. check out our Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals we've got this week starting if anyone is looking for any products.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody spending some time with us. Ryan, again, congrats on the Coach of the Year award and good luck on the national side.
Thank you.
Kyle, thanks for moderating, and everybody else. We'll see you next time on another SuperSpeed webinar.